The Paul Leslie Interviews.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, our guest, Gary Portnoy, is a singer, songwriter, recording artist, a two-time Emmy nominee. He's known to many for both co-writing and singing the theme song to the TV show Cheers, where everybody knows your name. Gary, it's a great pleasure to have you here.
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
So you're a native New Yorker?
Yeah, born and bred. Born in Brooklyn, borough of New York City. Grew up on Long Island and lived in Manhattan, New York Central for a couple of decades, and now up in the wilds of the suburbs, the northern suburbs of New York. So yeah, definitely.
I've talked to a lot of people from New York through the years, and people from New York are easy to talk to generally.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's good to know. Yeah, I think sometimes we speak before we think, but and then wish we had thought before we spoke. But I think it does make for easier conversation than people who are editing everything on its way out.
So, what would you say people from New York?
That being said, I'm going to put my my editing, a little bit of my editing mechanism in place. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No problem.
Yeah.
What would you say people from New York are like?
Oh God, I wouldn't. That's the beauty of New York, especially if we're talking about New York City, New York proper. The beauty of it is that so many people come to New York because they're not like anybody else where they are, and sometimes that's a difficult thing. Whereas in New York, it's a really cliche, but nobody really. Differences don't bother people, So to me, the beauty of New York is that there is no typical, New Yorker, stereotypes notwithstanding. I think that's what makes it, for me, the greatest city in the world.
What was life like for you growing up?
Oh, it was difficult. It was not an easy childhood. There were issues of alcoholism and in my family, So, and other issues as well. It was not a Norman Rockwell childhood growing up, but I had incredible grandparents, incredible support system. My grandma Dora, my grandpa Harry, and I had a piano. So, those were that's how I pretty much weathered my childhood on Long Island. Thank God I had a support system and a piano.
It's interesting you mentioned your grandparents. It seems like as time has gone on, grandparents are becoming less and less a part of people's, people have kind of moved away from that in a way.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. Well, I think the whole culture and the way we treat older people, especially as people are living older and older, I think we kind of push them more and more to the periphery as they get older and older, because it may not be that easy or convenient to care for them, and also maybe when I say we, I'm just speaking in society in general, don't want to look at it. We don't want to watch that process that perhaps awaits us. So I think that's true. I think there's more of a disconnect between older people and younger people now. I agree with you. Yeah, I think that's a huge loss. I know in my life, my gosh, it would have been, they were priceless to me.
So one day, you're 4 years old, your grandpa Harry is singing this Negro spiritual in the living room. Did he do that a lot?
No, he usually sang Sinatra.
Nice.
He just loved Sinatra. And one of my great regrets is that I didn't get Sinatra till about 10 years ago. I didn't understand what all the clamor was about. My grandpa tried to tell me. My grandpa was not a musician. He didn't tell me in eloquent words, but he was constantly trying to get me to understand it. And I didn't until about, I don't know, the light went on about a decade ago. And the way Sinatra could be, sometimes a little shaky, sometimes a little off pitch, but relate a lyric so unbelievably well. But it took me, like 5 decades to understand that. So, but I credit my grandpa for he tried. He kept playing me Sinatra, but the Negro spiritual, as it were. No, I don't remember him ever singing one before or after that. Wherever it came from. In fact, he didn't sing very much at all. But that particular day, he was singing.
And you were able to play on the piano just exactly what he was singing.
Yeah. It was. Yes, I did. I did.
You were born to be a musician.
I guess so. Yeah, I'd have to say that because nothing's ever drawn my attention other than kind of like psychology and the human psyche, which really is what art and music and songwriting are about. Nothing else has ever pulled me. Maybe that sounds kind of sad, but I've never been drawn to anything else. So yeah, I have a feeling that was what God had in mind for me. I hope so. Otherwise, I veered badly. Otherwise, I blew it.
So, is songwriting difficult?
Well, it depends. There's songwriting. I mean, it depends. Again, it's like trying to describe a New Yorker, because some songs present themselves to you almost out of whole cloth, and you marvel at how easy that was. And then there are others that you're working on. I found last year I went into a box. I was looking for something, and I found something else. I found a song that I had written in 1991 after my father passed away. It's called When My Father Was Young, and I found this song unfinished. I had forgotten about it, and I also realized I put it down because I just couldn't finish it, and I picked it up, and I finished it rather quickly. The music came back to me. I never write music down, so there was no record of the music. It came back to me instantly, and I just was able to tweak it and put some lyrics. So in my case, that's a song that took 25 years to finish, not the constant, not working on it constantly. But then there are other songs that literally sit down and they kind of write themselves. And of course, that only has to do with when you're writing by yourself. Then there's collaboration, and that's a whole other ball of wax, because then the difficulty, if there is difficulty, is not always about the song, but about the interpersonal aspect of writing something which is so intimate with another person, and all the stuff they bring to the table and all the stuff you bring to the table as different people. So that's a whole other that's a whole other. Sometimes that's easier because when you reach a blank, they fill it in. But other times it's more difficult because you're not on the same page, no pun intended. And one person's pulling here and one person's pulling there, or you just don't like them. You can be writing something you like and you don't like them, and it's a whole other it's a whole other layer of issues. So that to me is the difference between writing by oneself and co-writing.
Do you like co-writing?
When it's at its best, I love it, and there have been times when I've loathed it. I had to be, for one reason or another, had to be in a room with someone I did not want to be in a room with, and there's nothing worse than that. It's that's horrible. It's like trying to have an intimate relationship with someone you don't have any feelings for, or you don't like, or you have feelings for them and they're negative. So, I like it. I've done a lot of it in my life, and I've, if I had to say yes or no, do I like it? Yes. But I like it when I like the person, and I like it when the process is flowing smoothly. The other thing is, when you're writing yourself, you make all the decisions about when to pick up a song, when to put it down, when to return to it, and it's not a democracy. You're the ruler of your kingdom. But obviously, with collaboration, it's it doesn't work that way. So it's a complicated answer to a simple question.
Has there been a co-writer that you have most enjoyed working with?
There's not one. I've had several that kind of defined my. I did a lot of co-writing, but not with a ton of people until I went to Nashville. There they change partners like you change your underwear. I mean, it's a very different. The concept of co-writer in Nashville is a very different thing. But in my New York main writer's life, I had a series of co-writers, and I can't say there was one that I enjoyed the most, or maybe I enjoyed them the most for a while, and then I didn't. So I'm just gonna leave it at that. I enjoyed it, and then, especially when you're young, you can enjoy it, and then when you don't anymore, you can try and find somebody else to thrill you and then drive you crazy.
What does it feel like the first time you hear an artist's recording of a song you write?
In my case, I often felt profound disappointment in many instances, because I don't know, there's something perhaps quirky or individualistic about my writing. I think very often the people who recorded them sort of tried to smooth over the wrinkles. Whether they did it consciously or unconsciously, I don't know. So very often when it got back to me, I felt that it had lost some of whatever had made it special in the first place. So very often I was so thrilled to find out somebody was going to record my song, especially someone that I respected. And then when it would come back to me, I was usually disappointed. There was only one time when something came back to me where I felt it had been added to, expanded upon, taken, and it was a song that I wrote for Fame, and it was called I Still Believe in Me. And it was written very quickly under a lot of duress, and all I ever made was a home piano demo. Usually I made complex demos hoping that, I could kind of put my colors on the palette, and maybe somebody would hopefully steal from me. If they were going to record the song, I was hoping they would, I wanted them to take what I put into it. But in this particular case, I had nothing but a raw piano demo and sent it out to California, and it came back and it took my breath away. And, maybe it's sad that I'm this old and I've written that many songs. That's the only time that happened to me. But it was incredible. It really transported me to, there were a couple of chord changes that I hadn't put in. There was an incredible orchestration. I got to feel like what it feels like when you write something and somebody takes it and puts their own spin on it and just, blows you away. And it's an incredible feeling, to get back to your question. But it didn't happen to me that many times throughout my writing career.
What do you think is the best way to take on disappointment or to deal with disappointment?
Well, that changes, I think, as you get older. When I was younger, I would just, I might eat too much or drink too much or, take illicit drugs. I was never a drug person. My drug use would, make most people from that time and place scoff. But, the point is you might try to just turn it off, indulge yourself, go to a different place. And I'm speaking about music business disappointment because there's so much of it. There's constantly, when you're starting out, or at least when I was starting out, it's 99% disappointment. And you wonder, so to me, you just try to escape, to a different place and forget about it, and maybe sometimes even swear it off, but you knew you had to come back to it, which goes back to, is this what I'm meant to do? You knew you had to come back to it, and you knew you were going to come back to it, but you just have to get away and tell yourself that you don't have to come back to it, that it's voluntary. Like nobody has a gun to your head forcing you to take all this abuse that gets dished out in a business where, there's 10,000 of you and 10,000 songs for every song that somebody's looking for. By definition, it's just you're volunteering yourself over to rejection. And I guess everybody has the way of coping, and of course some people overcoped, many people overcoped and got into all kinds of problems with substance abuse and other, everybody I guess has their own coping mechanisms, but mine was just kind of deluding myself that I didn't need this and I could leave it any time I wanted to.
There's a story on your website, GaryPortnoy.com, which is an excellent website, I might add.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, lots of great stories and information and excerpts. Something that commonly happens, kind of speaking about disappointment, I hear from a lot of artists, they either write a song and they say, okay, we're going to cut your song, and then they hear back, yeah, we decided not to. Or even worse, I've heard from people, we recorded your song, it's not coming out.
Yeah.
It's just going to sit there on the shelves.
Yeah.
And then also, people have told me, I recorded a song myself for a record label or whatever, and it's not coming out. Mm-hmm. There's a story on there about you being a huge fan of Frankie Valli.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
Well, I can even predate that. I was very lucky. I got my very first wake-up call, dose of reality, when I was 18 years old, and I placed my first song with a publisher, and I don't think I put this story on that website. There was a group at the time called the Bay City Rollers, huge teenage girl heartthrob type of group, and they were having their surge of success. And I had just signed my first publishing deal, and my publisher told me that 2 of my songs were on hold with the Bay City Rollers. And as the process went on, I was told, well, they've narrowed it to 30 songs. They've narrowed it to 20 songs. And your 2 are still in the running. And at one point, I kid you not, I think they were down to 12 songs, and they were going to pick 10. And I was told that my 2 songs were still in the running. So I told everybody I knew. I told everybody who would listen. I told people that I didn't know that I was going to have at least one, because what were the odds that they would be down to 12 and my 2 songs would be well, anyway, you know the end of the story without me telling you. My 2 songs were not cut, and I spent the next year of my life being greeted by friends and family. So when is that Bay City Rollers record come? So when do we get to hear? So I learned a really great lesson early on, and just keep your mouth shut until you're holding it in your hand. And for years after, friends would say to me, why didn't you tell us about it? And I would just go, Bay City Rollers. But as for Frankie Valli, yeah, that, I don't have a lot of what I would call heartbreak moments. But to me, that was a heartbreak moment because I was recording an album for Capitol Records, which wound up not being released. So this covers almost every circumstance that you just described. But of course, at the time, I didn't know that, and my producer didn't know it. So I was recording this album, and a fabulous producer-arranger named Charlie Colello was arranging my album. He had kind of given up arranging. He had become a producer, but as a favor to my producer, he was arranging my record, and I had a song called Only My Woman Knows that he arranged for me, and he was producing Frankie Valli literally in the same building in the next studio. It was the record plant in New York City, and they had an album, and at the time, you were always looking for the single. Do we have the single? And Charlie thought that my song would be a single for Frankie Valli. He played it for Frankie Valli. Frankie Valli loved it, and they decided they were going to cut it. And I was beyond, I had never had an artist record one of my songs before. I was actually recording my album before anyone had recorded one of mine. I was just beyond, and my producer very quickly, and not in the nicest way, put the kibosh on it. It was, he said, that is not happening. He went on to say that he had put his young career on the line, signing me, a 19-year-old or 20-year-old, to a major label deal, and that song was important to the deal, and there was no way that we were giving it away to anybody, Frankie Valli or anybody else. And, it was just, I just can't tell you what that felt like. On some level, I think it went on to sabotage my own record. I'm not consciously, but so that was the most painful incident I ever experienced of somebody who I really admired and respected, really an icon of the times, wanting to record one of my songs. And the painful icing on the cake was I wound up meeting Frankie Valli a couple of years later in a different recording studio, and we were introduced, and he said, oh, you're the guy. And of course, the first thing he brought up was that song and how he had wanted to record it. So, yeah, for me, that's about as bad as it gets. when you're powerless, and a decision like that was made when creatively it was a go. And I really honestly kind of, put it into a comfortable place. And then when Jersey Boys erupted 10 or 15 years ago, it kind of brought it back to me. It's like, it was sort of like salt on the wound again.
Oh.
Yeah, it's horrible. It's really, it is one of the true regrets of my career when I look back. Because I think that would have been a great record.
We're talking with singer, songwriter, and recording artist Gary Portnoy. On the flip side, in your career, when have you been the most elated?
Sometimes it was just, getting news that I had a record deal or something that, didn't have to do with a specific creative moment or anything. Just, reaching a goal that you set and don't know if you're actually going to reach. But creatively, it was for that aforementioned song from Fame, where I finally got to hear a song of mine fleshed out and presented in a way that just, it brought me joy, pure joy. Beyond that, it's really hard. I don't know that I've had that much elation. I think the first time I heard the Cheers record on the radio. No, the first time my dad was driving on Long Island and he heard the Cheers song on the radio and he had to pull over. And my father wasn't prone to great excesses of emotion, and he was just, he was like almost like brought to tears, I think. That was elation for me. That was wonderful. And also, somebody called up a radio station. They wanted to interview my mom. So, and she was in a difficult place in her life, and the fact that somebody wanted to talk to her and shine a light, those moments brought me elation, and they really had more, they had more to do with people I love than myself. Those were, and I think the first time I was working on a musical many years ago, and the first time it was staged, and I saw it being performed, and it had been born out of nothing. It was born out of just a fluky, let's write a show. So for me, it seems my moments of elation have to do with things coming to fruition, I guess, and sharing them with other people. But those are the ones that pop into my head right off the bat.
The theme song to Cheers, is it something that, have you gotten tired of it at all?
No, I'm lucky. I like it. I'm really lucky. I like it. I don't, no. I mean, I've had songs that I've gotten tired of 5 minutes after I wrote it, or even songs that I love. I'm very, very lucky, because for me that song wears well, and I just like it. So otherwise my life would have been a torture, really, if you think about it. But no, I'm happy to say I like it, and it doesn't grate on me or wear on me, or so. Thank God.
I like the song too. What do you think it is about the song that people connect with?
I guess loneliness and awkwardness is pervasive, in the world, and probably for all the connectedness of the internet has probably gotten more so in the past 20 years. And before that, I just think, I think it's like a little hug, I think it's like a little group hug. I don't know. It just, I don't know. It stumbled onto some universality. It stumbled onto some universal need to belong, in a world where that's not always easy. So I think that's the appeal of the song in a general sense.
Would you say that you're more extroverted or introverted?
It totally depends on the circumstance. When I'm comfortable in my surroundings, I can be very extroverted and very forthcoming. And if I am uncomfortable, which usually has happened to me, sometimes I get in business settings. Sometimes I find myself, if I'm with someone that I've been in awe of my whole life or something like that, I can be very introverted, painfully shy. But I can also be very, the opposite way. So it really depends on the circumstances that I'm placed in.
You've recorded some albums yourself, and I was curious to know, is there a song from your discography that means the most to you?
No, not one. Not one. But there's a few that are of a very, personal nature that I wrote later on when I wasn't, sometimes when you're in the music business and you're a songwriter, sometimes you start thinking about where the song's going to wind up before it's finished, sometimes even before it's started. But, having reached a point in my life where I can just write my heart because that's what I feel, I've written some songs that are really special to me. I just, last year, as I turned 60, found myself just in the year or two before leading up to it, writing a bunch of songs that kind of all dance around that same premise, and I find that they're very, very special to me. I wrote a song called Temporary for my best childhood friend, Kevin, and people think I wrote it after he died, but I didn't. I wrote it the last time I saw him because I had this profound sense that I was never going to see him again. But somehow, and it was written 5 years before he died, but you wouldn't know that listening to the song. So I put his name in the title. I called it Temporary for Kevin. It's very, very special to me, maybe one of the most special I've ever written. And that song I mentioned to you earlier that I found in the box when my father was young, man, I really like it. And the journey that it had to be born is very special to me. So those pop out of recent vintage. And a song I wrote, a Destiny, that I wrote for my grandparents who we were talking earlier. Those are really important to me. So those are the three in my recent years, in my recent incarnation, that are the most, I think, special to me and mean the most to me. And the fact that I still have somewhat new songs at my age when I'm kind of retired that mean that much to me is, for me, a real blessing.
What did you think about Dolly Parton's treatment of your song Say Goodnight?
Well, I love Dolly Parton, and she can do no wrong in my eyes. So I loved her, and I felt that the arrangement was tepid. When I listened to my original demo, again, I never recorded in my earlier years to a click track. I just kind of, and sometimes I think I wrote songs that were a little rhythmically erratic, although you wouldn't have known it when you listened to my demo because there was no click track. And then I think people took the songs, and this is one instance where I think that happened, and recorded it to a click track. Boom, 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 kind of metronome. And in that particular case, my original demo had a really swaying kind of free-form emotionality to it, And then when they recorded it with Dolly Parton, I thought she was amazing. But the track to me was a little bit contained, tepid, robotic. That was the disappointment that I had with that record. Although, make no mistake about it, it's still a thrill to me. I'm still very grateful that Dolly Parton recorded one of my songs, because I love her.
And what about the Leon Redbone rendition of the song everyone knows from the Mr. Belvedere show?
Yeah, I got to like that. At first that song had been, I was going to record it, but I was already on, like, other shows, and so they recorded it and they scrapped it. Someone else recorded it in Los Angeles, and it didn't work. So it was kind of like I was called to an emergency session in New York, thank goodness, and Leon Redbone was in the studio. I can't speak for him. I don't know how comfortable he was with the song or how he wound up singing it. I think he was a favorite of the producers of the show, and I don't know how comfortable he was with it or not. But I just remember going in and trying to slow it down a little bit, and I sang it once or twice. Not that I need to teach Leon Redbone anything, but sometimes if you hear the writer of a song sing something, and we got through it. Then the horns were so loud that I called up his wife, who I think was his manager also, and I just said, you just might want to get them to lower the... One way or another, it came together, and at first it jolted me, but over time, whenever I would hear it, I came to like it, and I do like it, and I'm glad he recorded it. But it was a process for me to get to that place.
On your website, it says that you're enjoying a semi-retired life. What is a typical day like for Gary Portnoy?
Oh, it's pretty slow and uneventful by design. It's pretty slow and uneventful by design. I mean, that being said, last year I was recording and writing and recording, and it was anything but. I was in the studio 2-3 days a week. I was working with musicians. I was mixing. I was mastering, but always with a sense that I started slow and laid back, and I would get back to slow and laid back. And it was a very intense, wonderfully active year. But my life before last year and at the present time is very, slow. I get up. I have my breakfast. I put on maybe CNN, or I go online. I communicate with a few people, and I take a walk around. I like maple trees. I planted a lot of maple trees. I check on my maple trees, and I used to play with my cat a lot, but she passed away a couple of years ago, so there's a huge hole in that regard. And it gets around, at some point it gets to be lunchtime, and I have a couple of restaurants that are favorites around here, and I'm a person of habits. I'll go to the same restaurant, and it gets to be the afternoon, and I'll watch Judge Judy, and then I take a walk every single day. I take a walk every single afternoon. I don't care if it's raining. I don't care if it's snowing, unless I'm ill, which thankfully has been very rare. If I don't have a cold or put on a raincoat, I take a walk every single day of my life. And then, you shower, and it gets to be around dinner time. And then you settle in, you watch some TV. So I lead a very, for the most part, it doesn't, I visit with friends. I have a 98-year-old aunt who I visit with. But by and large, my days are unstructured and kind of boring. I like it.
Do you think that you will record another album?
I don't know. I ran out of songs this time. I was really enjoying recording this time so much that I probably would have kept going, but I ran out of songs. But I'm not a person who writes because I need songs. I spent a lot of years in the music business where I did, it was my job, and I got up every day and I wrote. And that's where I really enjoyed co-writing, because if I had nothing in my brain, I usually work off a lyric, so I really was grateful to have people throwing lyrics at me. But I wrote for projects and things I had to do or had to be in by Thursday or Friday. And not being in that position anymore for the past 10 or 20 years, I only write when I feel like writing, not because I need a song or to record or anything like that. So I ran out of songs when I when I finished my CD. And if I'm blessed enough to get a batch of songs, I'm thinking maybe this time, even if I write a song or two that I like, I won't worry about making an album or a CD or whatever they call it. Maybe I'll just record a song or two because I like them, and that I thought that might be the compromise, But I hope that I will, but I have no way of knowing. I've never known in my life when songs were going to come or not come, unless I was in the music business, pounding them out, as they say in Nashville. Let's pound one out. Unless I was pounding them out, I never knew when I was going to be blessed with music or not. And for me, the best thing is always it comes to me. It just says I'm here. And if that were to happen, I would love to record another album because I had a great time last year. But for the moment, it's kind of not an option. I was asking myself that same question the other day. Do you think you'll ever record? So that's my long answer. My short answer is I hope so.
What is the best thing about being Gary Portnoy?
Well, in my life, it's been, thus far, being in good health, and I've been grateful I haven't had to answer to that many people in the bulk of my adult life. And, my dad went to work every day for 35 years for a real creep, but it paid the bills, and we got our phone bill was paid, and he had got a car, and I watched my dad do that, and I was hoping to never have to do that myself. So when I think of that, I've been so grateful that I'm able to live unstructured days and to follow where they lead me, and that's something that I think that's the thing I think that's the best thing. I mean, I've also been, I've had wonderful people love me, and I've loved wonderful people, of course, but, just in a larger sense, it's been kind of like the freedom and autonomy that I've enjoyed, which some people would hate. I mean, I have friends my age, and the thought of retiring is paining them so much because they so require the structure that they've had, and I've been most grateful that I haven't had that structure in my life.
For anyone out there that's listening, wherever they might be, what would you say to them? Totally open-ended.
God, I would just say, be grateful. I would say find gratitude within yourself as often as you can for whatever you can find it for. And I know that for some people that's a really tall order because life can, but just, if I'm speaking just vaguely to a hypothetical person out there, I would say, be grateful to whoever whether it's God or the whoever your gratitude. The older I get, that's what it's about.
Why is gratitude important?
Well, I don't think it's a good thing to take blessings for granted. I think if God blesses you, or I don't think it's a good thing to get so swept up in life that you don't acknowledge that, or that you take it for granted, or you don't realize how special it is.
Yeah. Gary, it's been a great pleasure to talk with you.
Hey, me too.
You've been very, very open.
Well, I think you got me on an extrovert. You got me on an extrovert day. You didn't have to pull teeth.
So how do you...
Well, I appreciated your questions as well. So it was really it was nice. It was enjoyable. I hope I didn't yammer too much.
You did not at all.
Okay.
How do you define Gary Portnoy?
Oh, I don't. I leave that to other people because I've been given the impression that I'm a little bit of an anomaly. So I've never spent a lot of energy on that.
When people say you're an anomaly, do you take that as a compliment?
Absolutely.
You're an anomaly.
Yeah. Why would? Oh, thank you. I didn't realize you were just bestowing that upon me. Thank you. I appreciate that. I do. That made me smile.
For anyone out there, if they want more information, they can visit the website. It's GaryPortnoy.com. It's been a great pleasure to talk with you.
Same here, Paul. I appreciate it. I enjoyed it very much.
Well, sir, you have a wonderful and very unstructured day.
Thank you. And you as well.
I'll try.
Take care.
All right, bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.